This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
We are here with Minister Blair to study his mandate, and I see that we're all in order. Ms. Lambropoulos has her chocolate milk. Mr. Bazan has his chocolate milk. I know the minister is beyond excited to be here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, let me assure you I'm not beyond excited, but I've come right up to the line.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Blair. We'll turn to our 6-minute round, starting with Mr. Bazan.
Well, thank you, Minister, for joining us this morning. Appreciate that, and along with all the other witnesses that are joining you from your defense team. And thank you for all of the work that you all do in keeping Canada safe and supporting our Canadian Armed Forces and the important work that they undertake. Minister, in the defense policy update, when you compare defense spending that you plan for this year of $33.8 billion, the actual spending authorities for CAF and the Department of National Defense, and I'm talking about the creative counting where we add in other eligible departments of about $7 billion, just the direct spending to CAF and to the Department of National Defense, that is only at $30 billion. Why the $3 billion shortfall? Is that just lapse spending again, or is it part of the budget cuts?
No, I believe that my staff may be able to provide you a more detailed explanation either during this session or the next, and I would invite you to do that. But if I may just simply respond, we had in 2022-23, for example, $1.57 billion in lapse spending. I think it reflects some of the challenges we have in actually spending the money that has been allocated and budgeted for the National Defense Department. The procurement, in particular, of large platforms, it's important because we are stewards of the taxpayer dollars that we make sure that we are spending them well and wisely and getting the best possible value for those investments, but at the same time acquiring the best of equipment. And I can share with you that of that $1.57 billion that lapsed in 2022-23, $1.45 billion of that, or 92%, is still available for defense spending for future years. And this includes $1 billion for adjustments to spending on capital infrastructure projects, $240 million in carry-forward expenditures. I have another long list.
And you can send that to committee in the details.
Clarify something.
We'll definitely look at it.
It's not creative accounting.
Do you know, Minister,
it's actual
that
numbers.
At $30 billion, you actually allowed defense spending, direct defense investment in Canadian Armed Forces and the Department of National Defense to slip below 1%. According to Library of Parliament, their calculation is that we're at 0.95% when you don't count for the other eligible departmental spending of $8 billion.
And if I may clarify it, the only time that Canada has ever gone below 1% of spending was in 2013 and 2014 when you were the parliamentary secretary.
Two different worlds, Minister, and you know that.
Today,
you know that's two different worlds. There was no war in Ukraine. There was no war in Afghanistan. We were out of Libya. And now we're sitting here where there's war on our front steps in NATO's eastern flank.
It's only a fact that it did happen.
I'm asking the question.
And if I may.
Gentlemen, it works better when one person asks a question and another person gives an answer, not simultaneously. So I've stopped the clock. I'll allow Mr. Bazan to re-ask his question, and then we can go from there.
I'm going to move on because the minister is just going to talk over me regardless, rather than admit the facts that defense spending is now, again, when we're in a conflict situation with Ukraine where we have a greater adversary than we've ever witnessed in China, where we have Israel defending its rights to exist against terrorist organizations, plus the government of Iran, the terrorist regime in Tehran. I want to get down to NORAD modernization, $38.6 billion. We're getting new P-8s. We're getting new F-35s, finally, that are all going to get delivered in 2026. Our air wings across this country, including our forward operating locations, have to be modernized, and security has to be installed before we receive those planes. To date, you've only spent $30 million. Where is this money going? Like, why is it taking so long? We got planes coming and no infrastructure getting built.
And again, Mr. Bazan, if I may be allowed to answer your question. We've actually budgeted $38.6 billion for NORAD modernization, and we're working very closely with the commander of NORAD and with our American allies in making those investments. according to the plan in those investments, we know that we needed to acquire new capabilities. And as you've already acknowledged, we signed a contract for the replacement of the C-140s with the P-8. And those will begin to be delivered by 2026 with full delivery by 2028. I think that's a very significant advancement.
Are the wings going to be ready to receive them? Are the wings in Comox and Cold Lake going to be ready to receive them?
And I would also share with you that we are also making concurrent significant new investments in infrastructure, building new airport runways and new infrastructure, and acquiring hangar capabilities for the new aircraft that are being acquired. But as part of NORAD modernization, I think the most significant initial investments, according to the plan that has been put forward by Canada and the United States under the NORAD umbrella, is investments in over-the-horizon radar and over-the-polar radar.
So have we selected those sites yet where we're putting those up?
And if I may, we have been advised by our allies that they are working through issues with respect to that technology, which will determine where we should make the best investment in the sites for those.
I think there should be some equivalency between answer and question. I think ministers run past. You still have a minute, Mr. Bazan.
Okay, thank you. So just in my final minute here, Minister, yesterday you made a reference to the Geneva Convention and Israel's right to defend itself. You believe that Israel has a right to defend itself and retaliate against Iran for the attacks?
I think Israel has a right to defend itself and diminish Iran's capacity.
So you made the comment about saying that the striking nuclear sites, and we're talking weapons sites in Iran, and he says in violation of the Geneva Convention. I just want to read to you Article 56, as it is in Canadian law on the Geneva Convention, that works or installations containing dangerous forces, namely dikes, dams, and nuclear electrical generation stations shall not be made the object of an attack. I know Mr. Polyev was not talking about electrical sites like nuclear electrical power stations. He was talking about nuclear weapons development sites that is happening right now in Iran. Do you not agree that those sites are fair game for Israel to retaliate against the regime in Tehran? Yes or no?
It's not a yes or no answer. Canada is a signatory to the 1977 Adjusted Protocols for the Geneva Convention, the law of armed conflict. The law of armed conflict very specifically prohibits attacking nuclear facilities because of the risk that it poses to innocent civilians and to the environment. That is a convention that the world has agreed to. 174 countries have signed on to that protocol. And I think it's reckless and irresponsible to call for attacks on military facilities nuclear facilities that are very specifically prohibited under international humanitarian
electrical power.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Collin.
Russia and China are part of a global group that is spreading disinformation and is attacking our democratic institutions. And the DPU highlights this issue. Can you talk about how we address those issues domestically and then internationally with our partners?
It's a multifaceted question, and I think an important one. What we are seeing is the changing environment that I referenced in my opening remarks, and that I think we've highlighted quite very specifically in our North Strong and Free, our new defense policy update, is the changing environment requires an evolution in Canada's approach to its national defense and national security, and those things are very much related. What we are seeing as a result of climate change, our continent, our Arctic is becoming far more accessible. We're seeing with advances in new technologies that those technologies threaten our security, and we need to be able to respond appropriately, which is going to require significant new investments. And we also talk very extensively about the activities of our adversaries. And some of those we're seeing, for example, China is building up the largest military capability, an extraordinary investment in its military capability taking place over the past several years, which threatens to change the balance of security and power in the globe, and something that we and our allies need to respond appropriately to. We're also seeing, as a result of Russia's attack on Ukraine, that
I'm having troubles listening to this exchange. If there is a conversation to be had, I would prefer it to be taken place somewhere else other than the table. So please continue.
But not from the top.
Not from the top. No.
But I agree that we're seeing activities from Russia. One of the things we see, certainly they're challenging us militarily. They're also challenging us significantly in the cyber environment. And I think, and you highlight in your question, the importance of misinformation and disinformation, their efforts to destabilize our society, our institutions, important institutions like our political system, by engaging in polarizing rhetoric, misinformation, fear-mongering, threats and coercion against some of our citizens. Like all of those behaviors are almost a kinetic form of warfare, or non-kinetic form of warfare. It's asymmetrical, but it's something that Canada needs to respond to because they are direct threats. For the Canadian Armed Forces and through our people at CSE, we are very much engaged in countering those threats and making sure that, and I think we all have a responsibility, that the connection between national defense and national security, I think is clear. It's going to require advances in our approaches and closer work with our allies. One thing I would share with you as well, in my experience, Russia's invasion of Ukraine as an example, I think their intention was to destabilize the Western alliance and to cause rifts between us. It's had exactly the opposite effect. In my experience, all of the nations of NATO, including Canada and the United States, have become far stronger, far more united, far more resolute in purpose of making sure that we have the capabilities to counter the threat that those two countries represent, and others too, by the way, because we are also seeing that type of hostile activities from state actors such as Iran, North Korea. There is, unfortunately, a growing list of people who are clearly demonstrating that they are willing to engage in a number of very aggressive, assertive, and negative behaviors towards our society, our culture, our institutions, and our country.
It appeared in the news that Minister Sajjan had not given an order to prioritize the Sikh community, but had conveyed some information to the chain of command. And in June, on June 28th, we sent a letter to you, and the Department of Defense sent us a letter a month later in response saying they were examining the matter. Has an investigation started? Has anything started to shed light on this?
Before you answer that question, Minister, I'm not sure that's within the minister's mandate. We're here to examine his mandate, not a predecessor's mandate. And I would be very, very concerned about ruling that question out of order, but yes.
If I may.
That the minister's mandate letter that he's working on is the mandate letter of his predecessor.
I don't know. I think
I've inherited.
it's a what you've inherited. Okay. If you're comfortable with that question, my immediate reaction is that is out of order, but I'm content to defer.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I may, Madam, first of all, I did receive your letter. I've had my team make inquiries as to what information is available with respect to that period of time during the evacuation in Afghanistan. I have received a response from my predecessor, Minister Sajjan, but I also understand Minister Sajjan has agreed to appear before this committee. And so I think respectfully, I would allow him to offer his explanation to this committee rather than for me to try to interpret it on his behalf.
It was touched upon earlier, but of course, this week, Conservative leader Polyev made a truly appalling statement that Israel should strike Iranian nuclear facilities. We know how disastrous that could be. The international community has fought and very, very hard to protect the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant from Putin's bombings. And your government called that out, that reckless statement out. We certainly did. But Iran has been threatening to proactively attack those nuclear facilities and escalate the conflict even further. So, Minister, is the threat of an attack by Israel on nuclear facilities a red line for your government, and will Canada finally commit to imposing sanctions on Netanyahu's dangerous government?
And just to be really clear, it's not my job to start drawing red lines for other countries. Canada states its position very clearly that we believe very strongly and support the international humanitarian law and the law of armed conflict, and that is very clearly prohibits attack on nuclear facilities. We've made that position very clear. And for exactly the purposes that you outline.
So if
we were
this,
very concerned, if I may, we were very concerned with Russia's attack in the Zaporizhzhia region because the nuclear
but
facility
Canada would
there.
take no action if this were to occur?
Well, and again, it has not yet happened. I think the appropriate course of action right now is for Canada to articulate its position in support of international law.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, do you agree that foreign interference is a national security threat, attacking our democratic institutions, including the Canadian Armed Forces and Department of National Defense, is not immune to foreign interference?
I sent you a letter in December of 2021 and outlining or 2020, outlining that exact point.
So I appreciate that. Now, your former chief of staff kept the CSIS warrant off your desk for 54 days because it was politically sensitive to the Liberal Party.
That's
But-
out of order, Mr. Bazan.
It's
That
national
is not
security.
anything to do with his mandate.
So let me come back
That
on
is
this.
out of order.
Minister, as a current,
It also contradicts the sworn testimony that the hearing heard yesterday, and his statement is completely false.
was what she actually said, since he answered the
Well,
question. He addressed
the-
it. I should be allowed
It's
to.
either out of order or it's not out of order. I have to say that once there is a response, it gets to be part of the conversation. So
So,
Fair enough, but
so-
if he's going to make a video, it might as well have a little bit of truth on it.
not the
all
way.
right, carry on, and we can stay with the program. Stay with the.
So again, in your current role then, as Minister of National Defense, and from time to time, there's orders that come across your table that are going to be dealing with issues like foreign interference, like national security, that are going to require your sign off. Your former chief of defense, or your former chief of staff, withheld documents from you for 54 days. How does that not violate and contravene our national security?
And again, the premise of your question is false and contradicts the sworn testimony that the commission heard yesterday. As well, there's nothing political in decisions with respect to the national defense.
So if I quote Ms. Estradas, she said, anytime there is a name of someone I knew mentioned in a warrant or intelligence report, I always let the director and minister know. So first of all, she must have let you know then you must have been sitting out on it for 54 days based upon her own testimony.
Bazan, you're making stuff up that isn't true. And I appreciate that's your want, but and you may have you're making a video, and that's fine. But what you're saying is simply not true, and it has been contradicted by the sworn testimony of other witnesses. And I've appeared before that hearing 3 times and given sworn testimony, and I'm very pleased to be able to go tomorrow and give that sworn testimony again. And what you're saying has been contradicted by all of the evidence that's been presented to the committee.
Disagree with that. I believe that the testimony does speak for itself, and that does show that that a warrant sat around in your office, on your desk, and under the care of your former chief of staff that was actually, in the middle of here, we have a foreign interference inquiry being done by Justice Hogue, and I believe that the truth will be revealed in that process as well, never mind the testimony that's been given at the different committees here. So I will just share the rest of my time with Mr. Ellison.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank
Morning,
you.
Dean.
Thank you, Minister, for being here. So my question to you is that do you believe that a terrorist regime like Iran should be allowed to develop nuclear weapons?
I'm deeply concerned about the increasing military capability, including the acquisition of military weapons by a regime such as Iran. They have been a state explorer of terrorism around the world, and through the IRGC and through their Quds Force. They have demonstrated, support for other terrorist organizations, and yes, it's deeply concerning that such a regime should have that
So
military capability.
why wouldn't Israel then have the ability to attack those sites?
And again, I think the international community has a responsibility to do everything it can to prevent Iran from attaining those things. But at the same time, I think that should not be done in a way that puts countless lives and the environment at
So
significant risk.
are they not legitimate targets?
And again, there are very limited circumstances where those could be legitimate targets, but the international conventions on the law of armed conflict very specifically prohibits the targeting of nuclear facilities, which was frankly what your leader suggested.
No. What he said was going after sites that are actually responsible for developing nuclear weapons. How many sites in Iran actually produce nuclear energy?
I don't have that information.
To your team? So the World Nuclear Association says 1. We're aware of it. We're aware of it is. So obviously, we're not talking about targeting that. So why would we not just say that obviously we don't approve of them targeting sites that approve electron? That's not what Israel's saying, and that's not what our leader said either.
I think there is a very serious concern that if anyone was to target a nuclear facility anywhere in the world, whether it be in Ukraine and Zaporizhzhia or in any place in the world, that represents an unacceptable risk to innocent civilians and to the environment, and that's why 174 countries have signed on to an international convention that very specifically prohibits attack on those facilities.
Mr. Allison Lambropoulos, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister and team, for being here with us today. I guess my first question is going to be about recruitment, because we've heard time and time again that this is something really important and that we're not exactly where we need to be yet in terms of recruitment. We had earlier, a few weeks ago, I guess, witness come and tell us that the goal would be for 6,400 new members to be recruited in this calendar, or in this fiscal year, I guess. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, and if you think that is enough. If not, what can we do in order to make sure that those numbers grow at a quicker pace?
Yes, thank you very much for what I think is one of our most important questions, because as I said in my opening remarks, people are our most important asset. And I've already commented and expressed very sincere concern that losing more people than we're able to take on is not a successful strategy, and we had to turn it around. I am very pleased to report to this committee that there's been some outstanding work done by the Canadian Armed Forces and the Department of National Defence to significantly improve our onboarding and recruiting processes, and I think they've demonstrated real openness and commitment to doing what is necessary to resolve our hiring and personnel issues. There's some very important work that's going on. The new CDS, and I think it's more appropriate for her to perhaps come before this committee and outline, the nature of her plan. But as I have been briefed, it includes, I think, significant new measures. The introduction, as was recommended in our new defense policy, but also in Justice Arbor's recommendations of the establishment of a probationary period. That's going to allow them to bring people on much quicker, to begin their basic training, and then to complete some of the important security background checks, for example, before the person is in a sensitive position, but enables us to get started and really expedite the processes. We're also seeing, a very comprehensive reevaluation that's going on, not in any way to compromise the standards, the very high standards that we require for everybody joining the Canadian Armed Forces and their combat readiness. But at the same time, it's going to enable us to address, I think, more appropriately some of the impediments that we have identified in getting people in the door. There's also been some really good work done, because as I know this committee has been advised, permanent residents were given the opportunity about 2 years ago to make applications to join the Canadian Armed Forces, and about 20,000 of them immediately signed up. We saw that the intake was impeded by some of the challenges in doing over again the security background checks for those individuals. There's been some really good work done between the Canadian Armed Forces and IRCC and others to expedite those processes, and I'm very encouraged by the path that we are currently on. I believe that we've turned a very significant corner, and that we will see an increase in recruitment, but we're not done. There are a number of really important initiatives that I think we can undertake. I think the opportunity that we can give Canadians to serve their country in the Canadian Armed Forces, to engage in real national public service for this country, is a great opportunity for those young people and a great opportunity for the Canadian Armed Forces. And so we are committed. One of the things that I've asked the CDS to look at is there are a number of bottlenecks in those recruitment processes. Then our capacity to put people through basic training is one of those bottlenecks. And so we are looking at how we address that and increase that capacity. We also have a very extensive and comprehensive review going on to our military colleges at Saint-Jean, Richelieu, and at RMC in Kingston. Those I hope, are going to give us a number of recommendations that will enable us to make those more efficient and effective in getting the cadre of leadership that we're also going to require for the Canadian Armed Forces.
About the 155 millimeters, you said you would quadruple the production of these munitions? We were at 5,000 earlier, and where do we stand now?
Yeah, still a work in progress, but I've been to the munitions production plants in Quebec. I think that we've had a number of important conversations, and our team is working very closely with them. They told us two things. They told us they needed an investment in their production lines, and they needed secure supply chains in order to increase their production. They also needed the certainty that would come with long-term contracts. And so that they know that if the orders were there, then they would produce to meet those orders. And so,
Avec respect, Monsieur le Ministre.
With respect, Minister, we know what their needs are for the industry. On the industry side, my question is, in actual fact, where do we stand in terms of production?
we are still working very much in the negotiation because when we went to industry, they told us they needed a certain amount of money of investment. When we went back to them with that money, they doubled it. And then we went back to them with another significant increase in our investment, and they doubled it again. And so I have a responsibility to manage the Canadian taxpayer dollars, and we are stewards of those dollars. And so there's a negotiation taking place about what is the right investment in those industries, and there's also some work to do to complete the long-term contracts that they need. We are going to increase our production and our acquisition of those munitions because we need to do it, but we need to do it responsibly.
Ms. Gallant, 5 minutes.
Minister, what instructions have you given your current Chief of Staff to ensure they don't withhold information from you that's vital to national security, like the way Zita, your former Chief of Staff at Public Safety, and the Chief of Staff for the former CDS for Minister Sajan did during the Vance controversy?
I reiterate my view that this is the mandate of the current minister, and his commentary on previous ministers' practices or non-practices is out of scope. However, having said that, proceed.
I'll defer to your ruling as to whether or not this is in scope or not.
Okay, so there are no measures taken to overcome the problems we had with
And as a
Minister
point of
Vance.
clarification, I did not say that.
Okay, so are you satisfied that Canada is investing sufficiently in cyber capabilities to deter and respond to non-state cyber aggression?
Yeah, we've got some really good news on that. Just a few weeks ago, we stood up our new Canadian Armed Forces Cyber Command under General Yarker they'll be located here in Ottawa, and there's been some very significant new investments.
Great.
In our North Strong and Free, I would point out an investment of more than $1 billion in cyber capabilities at CSC, and I'm sure that my colleague from CSC will be able to expand on that later.
How do the repeated breaches at GAC continue to occur?
And again, I'm in this room. Unfortunately, I'm not going to talk to you a little too much about those things. I think there's some great work that is being done particularly by CSC.
They need more money to get what needs to be done to keep it secure. How are you going to get that money?
The government of Canada experiences billions of attacks on its systems each and every day. And I think our officials do some extraordinary work. And
GAC is still being attacked every day, and the intruders are getting through. So barracks for new recruits are in such poor condition, they've had to be condemned. And you haven't allotted any money to replace these buildings on a number of bases. How are we expected, or how are you going to recruit and retain our lower ranks when federal prisoners have better accommodations?
Yeah, unfortunately, your question omits the fact that there's already existing funding for investing in those things. I've recently been out. We're investing very significantly in new barracks in Esquimalt. We're investing significantly. We just opened up new barracks in Borden. There are already monies already allocated. I invite you to go to some of those bases and see the new facilities.
I've been to my base. I've been to Petawawa, and they've had to condemn 2 buildings, and there has been no money in sight to replace those buildings. They don't even have enough accommodations for the current lower ranks. And we've got to accommodate people who are coming in for training for the Latvia mission. So where are we going to put them all? They can't all be in tents all winter.
Yeah, and I've already referenced that there's some really important work going on right now to increase our capacity to provide basic training and other training to all of our members. And I would acknowledge, after decades of underinvestment in the Canadian Armed Forces, certainly through Safe, Strong and Engaged, and now through ONSEF, We're making
it too.
and well, I was answering your question, but if you'd like to pass it before I complete my answer, that's up to the chair.
You've answered my question.
You have a minute and a half, Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sir, are you okay with Iran developing nuclear weapons?
No.
Okay, because earlier you said you were as concerned about it, so that's a very much better answer. I have something a little bit more basic to talk about. It's again about ammunition for our reserve forces. Reports that I've heard indicate that there's not enough 9mm ammunition for our reserve soldiers to get certified on the new 9mm pistols. And I'm just wondering if there's any plan in place to accelerate that condition. And then the next question. Yeah.
Thanks. I was getting an answer for you.
Okay.
Would you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're spending about $200 million on munitions currently. That's our current expenditure. It has not been reported to me by CAF or by any indication that the reserves don't have adequate munitions to train. But I don't have the information that you referenced.
The other report I had was that half the Army's equipment is unserviceable. There's a $150 million shortfall due to the government budget cuts. And I just wanted to understand what that says about the Liberal government's commitment to armed forces.
Yeah, you're conflating two very significant issues. There is a real challenge with the maintenance of our equipment. A lot of it's old, and
I see the brand new Lavs at Denison sitting there for weeks on end, not moving.
Yeah, and I'm glad you saw them because we're delivering new vehicles. We've entered into contracts to deliver 1,500 new light and heavy trucks for the Canadian Armed Forces. We've also invested very significantly in new labs that are being delivered. We're doing the work that, frankly, previous governments have neglected in order to get our people what they need. And we are also investing in the maintenance of existing equipment, but replacing it is also a really important
I
priority.
have to leave the answer there, however satisfactory or unsatisfactory it may be. Mr. Pawlowski.
Mr. Minister, you talked about learning a lot from the war in Ukraine. And certainly one of the things that I think we've learned from that is what would seem to be a worldwide shortage of ammunition. The Ukrainians don't have enough 155mm shells. Madame Normandin asked about the production of more shells, and your response was, well, there was a company that was going to provide it, but they doubled the price. And then when we agreed to that, they doubled the price again. I'm not sure how many companies there are that make the 150mm shells, but it seems to me from your response that there's a problem that we don't have enough companies that are making that form of ammunition. And from the previous question, perhaps 9mm ammunition, there would seem to be perhaps a market failure here in that under normal times there isn't enough demand for 155mm shells, but now there is, and perhaps in 6 months or a year, it would be nice to think the war in Ukraine could be over. There may not be a demand, but this would seem to me to be the kind of market failure that requires government intervention to support companies starting to produce 150mm shells and other forms of ammunition. Has there been any effort on the part of the government to give incentives to companies to start production of ammunition?
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcus, and a good opportunity for me to clarify my remarks. I went to industry when I first came into this job, and I said, we need you to increase your production, and particularly around munitions, but not just munitions. We need a significant increase in military production right across this country. Our industries are very strong and very capable. But I think for a very long time, there's been a significant underinvestment, and we went to them and they said, we need to open new production lines and we need new supply chains. And that's going to require two things, an investment from government, but also long-term, the security and the certainty that long-term contracts provide. And it's one of the reasons we brought forward in our new defense policy update, significant new investment in both industry and in those long-term contracts. And so what you have suggested is exactly what we're proposing to do. But at the same time, it does require that we work very carefully with industry. They have told us even if we make those investments in their production capability, because we already buy ammunition from them. We buy a lot of ammunition from them, but we need more. And so we're going to invest in those industries and we're going to offer them long-term contracts. But we also have an interim problem because the Canadian Armed Forces needs ammunition now, and so do our Ukrainian friends. And so that's one of the reasons we entered into an agreement with the Czech Republic. And I have been buying munitions, 155 ammunition for Ukraine through that Czech initiative because they're able to buy it on the market. And so we're funneling money through those coalitions, part of our NATO partnership, in order to acquire those munitions. I am also prepared to purchase on the international market for the Canadian Armed Forces until the Canadian industry is capable of meeting our requirements. But I think that a number of lines of effort need to happen concurrently. We need to invest in Canadian industry. We need to work on those contracts with them. We need to build up their production. And at the same time, we need the immediacy of responding to the needs of, first of all, the Canadian Armed Forces. That's my first priority. But a very close second priority is making sure that we're able to provide Ukraine with what it needs.
My second follow-up question is another thing that the war in Ukraine has taught us is the growing importance of drones. We've purchased F-35s, but if you see what's happening in Ukraine, Ukrainians have managed to do very well with some very cheap drones, sometimes costing hundreds of dollars, destroying much more expensive weaponry on the Russian side. This would certainly seem to be the way warfare is going. What are we doing specifically in terms of research to develop new and better drones, cheaper ways of producing drones, and producing those drones and having those drones in our military?
That's a pretty important question, and I want to, but you've left them very little time to answer it. 30 seconds, a little bit better.
Yeah, 100% agree. Canada has a very robust capability of building drones. We're investing in research and development. We're also looking at anti-drone technologies, and we've been testing those in Canada as well, along with our allies. It's important work. Canada has also invested in Ukrainian production of their own drones, and that has been very helpful to Ukraine. And so we're investing in building some of those cheaper drones that they use so effectively. But it also gives Canadian industry an opportunity to learn from the experience of the Ukrainians and to add that to our research and development. It's very much a partnership that is being developed, and we're also working very collaboratively because Canada is part of the drone coalition for NATO, and our industries and our government is working very closely with all of our allies. We see this as a new frontier of both defensive and offensive operations. I think Canada has great capabilities, but we can do better and do more.
Thank you, Mr. Pawlowski. And on behalf of the committee minister, I'd like to thank you for your appearance here today.